Hi, everyone, and welcome to another video in this series on learning with AI. If you are not aware, what I'm doing in this series is, at least, in the beginning, I'm going to go over more or less the stages of something called Bloom's taxonomy. According to Bloom, there's a couple of stages to learning. There's a lot more than three, but I broke it down into three stages. The first stage is foundational fluency. That's where you are learning a new concept and you basically just need to know the who, the what, the where, right? All the basics first. The second stage, I'm calling the application stage. That's where you learn to apply these concepts in practice. If you can do that, you are really solidifying your knowledge and kind of beginning to gain mastery. The third step for Bloom is quite a few interesting steps. Bloom says that at this stage, you can, critique a concept, see if it's useful or not. You can be creative with a concept, maybe fuse it with other concepts. So this third step, I'm calling active engagement, and it corresponds to a couple of levels of Bloom's taxonomy, but that's a really fun stage. In this video, we are still on what I'm calling stage 2, the application stage. And what I want to do in this video is show you a couple of ways that you can use AI when you are trying to make sure that you are applying concepts correctly. So the very first thing that I want to do is make sure that you are ready for this stage. A lot of students I've seen over the years tend to unnecessarily frustrate themselves by moving on to this stage of learning without really having mastered the concepts. You have to know all the basics of a concept before you can start applying it correctly. So if you can't immediately jot down the definition from memory or a definition from memory, then you're not ready yet. It just, you shouldn't force yourself to move on unless you're ready for it. So if you do that, if you go ahead and, make sure that you're ready for this, that's one guaranteed way, maybe not guaranteed, but one useful way for keeping yourself motivated. And so before you move on to the stage, I insist that you try out a couple of diagnostics. And the nice thing about this is that you can now use AI to test yourself, right? To diagnose if you're ready to move forward with new material. Now, there's a couple of ways to do this. I have here a prompt that I've devised for you. And I think in every prompt in this video, I'm going to use this same role. So I'll only read it this one time. Here is what we're telling the AI. You are an adaptive, personalized tutor for an undergraduate in college. Rather than provide answers, you nudge in the right direction. So, I think this is a good way to try to make sure that the AI doesn't immediately provide answers for you. I actually have way more robust and wordy versions of this role prompt, but I'm going to give you this very simple one, and maybe on the website, I'll give you sort of the more complicated one. In any case, that's what we're working with, at least for now. And let's get into the diagnostic stage. So here's what I'm telling the AI task. I am studying the following learning objectives. And that's where you insert your learning objectives. Please quiz me with 6 questions, or you can change the number of questions, of course, but I like 6. These may include basic comprehension questions, conceptual questions, and questions with highly nuanced answers. Ask one question at a time and await my answer. Keep track of my performance. After the assessment, give a brief feedback. So I've already tried this, and I want to show you what I got. I really like the bit about, one answer at a time or one question at a time. Otherwise, you get a wall of text, and I'm not crazy about that. So here is what I input. I used Claude on this one. Here's the role, and here is the task, right? So I told it, I'm learning about John McCormick's Thinking AI. It's a book that just came out as of this recording, at least. And I have to, because I'm going to talk to John McCormick, that's part of my job. I kind of enjoy that. I get to talk to really smart people. I want to make sure that I know what I'm talking about when I talk to him. And so I'm learning about neural networks, the concept of emergence, different milestones in the history of artificial intelligence, and what we might call AI understanding or lack thereof, right? So some forms of AI clearly have no idea what's going on, but according to John McCormick, some kinds of AI maybe do have something like understanding. So that's what I'm telling Claude that I want to learn about. And then I say, well, please quiz me with 6 questions. And of course, one at a time. And what it gave me, I'm actually quite pleased with it. So it gave me one question here about Eliza, and I give my answer. And I'll just scroll down through this. I'll actually put a link up to this thread on the website so you can check it out if you'd like. I answered most of them for real, like I actually was using this to learn. And I also gave it one answer that was basically just for me to see how it does with not so good answers. And it did a pretty good job. So here is the debrief that it gives at the very end. And it says basically what I thought it would say, right? So this answer that I gave was a truthful answer, and my performance is strong, apparently, very good. Good with minor gap on depth. So I actually answered this truthfully, but it said, you could have done better. And I agree, right? So I am not a computer scientist. Clearly, you can see that where I do the best, question 5 and 6 are on basically philosophical matters. I am a philosophy professor, so clearly I answered excellently in those. And that's what it reflects. So actually, overall, I think this is a very good debrief. And this question on reinforcement learning is the one that I deliberately kind of, slopped up a little bit. And it did great, right? It said, well, you kind of have it, but it asked me a follow-up question so that it can further clarify my understanding on reinforcement learning. That's pretty good. So then after this, that's just the diagnostic, of course, and you should definitely engage in diagnostics. Ideally, though, you do something with that information. The follow-up stage or the follow-up exercise should be that you work on whatever you didn't do that well on, right? It's not enough to just know where your weak points are, but you have to address them. So the next thing to do is figure out whatever the debrief it gave you, if you agree with it, that you need to kind of follow up on that. Well, have the AI kind of help you make your understanding of that weak point a little more profound, make it a little stronger. And so that is exactly what I did with this prompt right here. I tend to not like when people do something like, hey, Mr. AI, explain this to me 3 different ways. I do think it's valuable when the AI explains things to you, but I think it's even more valuable when you first try your best to work without the AI to, sort of improve your understanding. Maybe you can go and read a little bit more from your notes and then try to really kind of summarize your own thoughts on something. And you input that summary into the AI, and then you ask it to give you some further kind of elaboration. That's exactly what I did in this prompt. Here is the task. I'm telling the AI, review my explanation of this concept. Whatever your weak point was, that's probably what should be in there. And then you insert that little explanation that I told you about, your little summary of, you did some studying and you kind of, went over your notes and you tested yourself a little bit. And then you came up with a new summary. All right, here's what I think, whatever your weak point was, here is what I know about this now. And you write it out without notes. You basically try to do it from memory. By the way, this is called retrieval practice. And then once you have that little summary, insert it to the AI, right? Give it to the AI and say, okay, now explain this concept that I just gave you my little summary of. so as to further my understanding, either correcting misunderstandings or expanding my knowledge. In other words, by first giving it sort of a snapshot of your current understanding of a concept, you are giving the AI an opportunity to either correct any little, mishaps in that little explanation that you gave it, or to expand it where there's room for expansion. It can kind of move into that area and really help you have a more complete understanding of that concept. And then you tell it what a lot of people do, but I think it really is useful. This should be done in 3 stages: an intuitive explanation, a more precise explanation using disciplinary terminology, a technically accurate explanation suitable for an exam, right? So these are basically 3 levels of difficulty. And very important though, I don't think it's enough to just give you a little explanation. You have to get tested on it. Otherwise, you might have just read over something and you forget it instantly. The more you think about something, the more likely it is that you are going to learn it and understand it deeply and store it in long-term memory. So after each explanation, I'm telling the AI, ask me 1 or 2 questions to gauge comprehension and give helpful feedback. Ask 1 question at a time and await my response. So I think that's very much key whenever you are working with AI. It's not enough to let it explain things to you. Check that you understand the explanation. So I will provide this prompt on the website. In this chat with Claude, I went ahead and did that with reinforcement learning. So reinforcement learning is my weak point, according to this debrief that Claude gave me. And, to be honest, it is my weak point. Even though I kind of deliberately slopped up the answer, it really is the case that I understand reinforcement learning much less than the other things covered on there. So I gave it the prompt, and I inserted, instead of concept, I wrote, of course, reinforcement learning. And then I gave it my little summary of what I understand reinforcement learning to be at the moment. And then I say, okay, explain this so as to further my understanding. There's 3 stages, as we mentioned. And here is what I got. I am very happy with it. I actually haven't continued to work on this, but it gave me stage 1, the intuitive explanation. And then it asks for, a follow-up. It just says, hey, I want to make sure that you understand what's going on here. Why do you think that reinforcement learning is better than, supervised learning, right? So now it's invoking, different kinds of AI research methods, and it really is testing me on how much I understand this. So I definitely love this prompt. I think it's incredibly useful, and I think you should use it as much as possible before you move on to the application stage. Okay, so all of this has been before we move into the application stage. You have to run a diagnostic on yourself, make sure to address those weak points. I want to give you some food for thought because this is an incredibly valuable lesson, and it has to do with something called deliberate practice. I read this book a long time ago, but it is a great book, basically a decade ago. Wow, time flies. And it is from Anders Ericsson, who died actually during COVID. Rest in peace. Anders Ericsson was the expert on expertise. Basically, he studied experts his whole career, and he tried to differentiate, or he tried to isolate what is the difference between experts and non-experts, like what makes someone an expert, basically. And apparently, the key is something called deliberate practice. This is a very structured type of activity. It's basically unlike the way many people study. A lot of people, when they study, they just kind of like go over their notes and maybe reread the text or whatever, and that's it. Not good enough, says Anders Ericsson. The people that become experts within a field, within a domain, what they do is continuously assess themselves. They're always checking as objectively as possible how well they understand something or perform at a particular task. And so it is by testing yourself that you can discover your weak points and then come up with activities to strengthen those weak points. That's exactly basically everything we've been talking about this whole time. But deliberate practice is incredibly important if you're actually going to learn something. By the way, this is supposed to be unenjoyable. I kind of like this. I stole this from an article from Anders Ericsson from even earlier, 1993. And it's a quote, and it's very telling, right? So, specific tasks are invented to overcome weaknesses, and performance is carefully monitored to provide cues for ways to improve it further, right? So you're always honing in on your weak spots and trying to, iron them out and get better, always trying to get better. Back to the quote though, here's the important part. We claim that deliberate practice requires effort and is not inherently enjoyable. I love that. He's basically saying, look, this is supposed to suck. It's not supposed to be fun. And so whenever you're doing these prompts that I'm going to, or using these prompts that I'm going to give you, it's actually not fun at all. You have to test yourself and you have to be patient and you're sort of always on the verge of frustration, but that's a good thing. That's the learning effect. So you actually have to go and seek out that discomfort to learn, says Anders Ericsson, the expert on expertise. Okay, so deliberate practice is basically what I think you should really do. Always push beyond your comfort zone. And of course, there is a way to use AI in this process. Don't let AI think for you. Don't just passively receive whatever interpretation AI gives you. When it gives you something, test yourself. And even before it gives you an interpretation, you work hard and write out your own summary, your own interpretation, and give that to the AI. Always do the mental work yourself first, and then feed that to the AI and say, how can you make this better? Or argue against me. You should treat AI like a sparring partner. And so these are some basic tips here that you can use when you are engaging in deliberate practice. I will also provide this prompt for you that essentially combines the last two activities into one, where it's a diagnostic into deliberate practice. So you can definitely check that out on the website. Okay, let's finally move into the actual point of the video, which is application. I am a fan of association. Association is basically when you connect things that you are learning right now to things that you already know. Ideally, you connect things that you are trying to learn to things that you already know within that discipline or within that field. So in other words, if you're trying to learn something about economics, maybe don't go right to baking if that's something you're really into, unless it's running a bakery, right? So it's got to be somehow connected to the thing that you are trying to learn. So I have here a prompt that can help you do this. And essentially, there's something that you have to do. And I'll actually try to work on this by the time that you find the prompt on the website. But the role is the same. Here is a task. Ask me, what is a hobby or career path you are passionate about? Feel free to give one or two examples. Now, it is the case that when you are giving examples, you should try to give the AI something that is connected to the thing that you are trying to learn. So in my earlier example, let's pretend that you're learning about economics and you're really into baking. Okay, well, you shouldn't say just baking. You should probably say in here running a bakery, because that is easier to link to economics, and the connections to whatever your learning content is will be a little clearer for the AI so it can just kind of do that more easily. So in any case, you're going to give it something that relates to what you're learning, and then you're going to tell it what you are learning. So here is task 2, the actual learning task. I am attempting to learn the following. And I would limit it to about 3 concepts, 1 to 3 concepts. I tried it with more. It wasn't awesome. So I would say 2 might be even the more magic number, but 3 still works. Help me apply these concepts to modern scenarios. Please generate 2 scenarios per concept, but tailor these scenarios to my personal interests. Ask me comprehension questions one at a time. Ensure that I always give a justification. That is, never just say correct immediately, but instead ask what specific logic led you to that choice. Give a helpful debrief at the end. So, in a nutshell, you are connecting things that you are learning to things that you already know. And what the AI is going to help you do is come up with scenarios to help make those links. So I already have one prompted up here. I used Gemini for this one. Let's see. Okay. So what I did is it's actually the exact same prompt. All I did was I input that I am learning about reinforcement learning and unsupervised machine learning, right? So the distinction between those two. And so here is what it asked me. What is a hobby or career path you are passionate about? I'm very weird, right? So I'm actually into gardening. Now you know that about me. And I grow my own chili peppers and herbs. So I said that. And I also said that I'm fond of food and wine pairing. Ain't that the truth? And physical fitness and hiking. The older I get, the more I like hiking, by the way. I always liked it, but I like it more. Anyway. So then it does its typical thing. Fantastic choices. It always tells me it's fantastic no matter what I put in there. But then it gives me some interesting scenarios. So the first one is the first 2 are for unsupervised machine learning. The most important thing, though, about this whole setup is that it's going to ask me questions. Remember, it's never okay just to read the output and say, oh, that means I understand it. Always check that you actually understand it. And so I asked it to, give me questions, and it says, okay, well, then here's a question on scenario 1. Let's make sure you actually understand it. I gave my little response, and I think it liked it overall, right? What did it say here? So it gave me a couple of, further ideas to kind of work with to help deepen my knowledge. Question 2, and I think it also kind of liked this answer, but that's very important. You actually have to make sure that you answer these questions, these follow-up questions, honestly and truthfully to make sure that your comprehension is actually accurate. At the end of this whole thing, it will give me another debrief, and I will also link to this conversation thread or this thread with the chatbot on the website so you can check out what happens. But okay, so that is, I think, a very useful prompt for the application stage of learning. And what I really like about this is that, look, as a teacher, I would love to personalize things for you every chance I got, right? But I don't know about a bunch of stuff. The AI does, or know in quotation marks, right? But the AI can talk about things that I don't know anything about, like K-pop and, TikTok and My Little Pony or whatever. Like, I don't know about those things, so I can't make scenarios for you. The AI can and give you instant personalized feedback, right? So that is why this is so useful. Make sure to use it correctly. Make sure that you use it to actually learn. Don't let it replace your thinking. Okay, I have one more application prompt for you. Just 2 prompts today on application, but I think they're very useful and very versatile. So you can use these a bunch. Dual coding. is incredibly useful. Apparently, we learn better when information is presented in both verbal and visual forms. Funny story, I used to be so anti dual coding. I don't know why, but I didn't want visual information. I wanted to just think about it. That was dumb. So definitely take advantage of visual diagrams whenever you can. There's a couple of ways to go about this because some disciplines very much lend themselves to visual representation. For example, if you are working on maybe some biology, right? There's actually great visual representations of that. There's even actually pretty good visual representations of like economics and sociology, but that doesn't work as well sometimes with philosophy. So there's a couple of ways to do this depending on whatever field you're trying to learn. So here's sort of a sample assignment that might work for some fields. Have AI create a visualization of an abstract concept as a physical diagram or a concrete scene. Explain that scene back to the AI. Finally, have the AI provide feedback. So, maybe you want to do this for a physics class that you're taking or a chemistry class. Actually, my chemistry teacher was great at this. He would kind of come up with like a little soap opera situation where some chemicals like each other and other chemicals don't like each other. That's great. That's great for learning. And so you can actually have the AI, maybe ChatGPT or Claude, they would probably be good at this kind of thing. Make a visualization, right? Make an image. And then you explain why that image is a good representation of whatever concept you're learning, and then have the AI give you feedback. So I'll provide a prompt for you on the website for that. I think that's great. I think it works really, really well for some fields. Unfortunately, this approach doesn't always work super well for a really abstract field like philosophy. So I have another prompt for that one that's a little bit different. So I have in here, I want you to tell an accurate story about historical event, or you can just say concept, or whatever, abstract thing you're working with. Instruct the user that they are to visualize the events as you describe them. After you have described an event that is easy to visualize, stop and ask the learner to describe the mental images they just formed. Do not provide the answer, but instead wait for the learner to type in their description of the image they formed. After the learner is finished typing, provide feedback on these images, indicating whether they were appropriate and how they could be improved. Following this, continue the story, being sure to touch on key elements of the history, asking the mental images, and providing feedback. So I'll give you sort of an updated version of this prompt on the website, one that hopefully works for any field you want to put in there. Let's look real quick at what happened when I tried this out. I, of course, am learning about AI. And so I put in here, I want you to tell an accurate story about the development of the architecture of ChatGPT. And I had to make sure to include deep learning, reinforcement learning, and transformers. And this is very good. Even though this probably could have, been done with images, and like in the first idea that I gave you, I think this is still really good to sort of just give you, a picture with words and then ask you about that picture. And so it gave me a little, visual scene of deep learning, the historical development of deep learning, and it's pretty good. And then it basically said, okay, try to walk me through this image, right? It says, describe the mental image you formed. What did you see when the data moved upward through the layers? And then I kind of described it, what I kind of visualized. And this is all very much, image-based, right? You really are describing your mental images. And that's great. That is how you learn, right? That's dual coding. And this, I think it worked really, really well. It gave me some feedback, and it actually thought, oh, I like that image, but change it to this. And, it's actually quite useful. and it moves on from there. I will also provide a link to this thread so you can check it out. But generally speaking, I think that dual coding will work very well for almost any field. You may have to, kind of be smart about which prompt to use, because some fields are very much easy to visualize with an image, right? You can just tell it, make me an image. And other fields, it might be better to work with mental imagery, like in this prompt that I have right here in front of you. In any case, happy learning. Feel free to use and share all the prompts on the website.